Well, thank you, Dr. I just call her Dr. Barbara, but it's really a pleasure to be with you. I now have to say that I am not the nation's best civil rights lawyer, but I am very proud and pleased of all the work you're willing to do and just how important you are. So I just want to underscore everything that's been said about what you're endeavoring to do. And, I will just remind us why we're here, which is Romans chapter 13, verse 1. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. So here's the governing authorities, because this goes to your ability to feel a lot of power and importance in your role as people who are observing, as people who are supporting, and as people who are ensuring that folks can vote by de-escalating. So let me just say what the authorities say. Let me just say this. I'm going to talk both about National Guard as well as ICE because they are both in uniform. They are both in some places been deployed in various ways. I'm hearing I can't be heard, so I just want to make sure I am unmuted. Yes, okay. And that is that we have federal statutes. Thank you. We have federal statutes too, in fact. One says, basically, and I'm going to paraphrase and use plain talk, but it's very clear language, even if I use the legalese. Basically, if you're in the military, you can't be ordered, soldiers can't be sent to polling places during an election. That's just it. You cannot order troops to go to a polling site as a polling site. And so that's actually a criminal statute, by the way, which means whoever the officer was that sent that would be subject to that. It is specific to the military. I see some of you jumping right in with the next best question. The next statute, which is also a criminal statute, makes it a crime for anyone, anyone, anyone. That includes people in uniform. That includes ICE. From, and again, plain talk, intimidating, threatening, or coercing voters at polls, which that means that your observation of even showing up can be an opportunity for you both to observe as well as to raise the alarm bells and work to de-escalate around their presence. Now, let me unpack this a little bit. Because the thing about ICE, I just want you to, let me say one other thing about power. If Donald Trump were to say, invoke the Insurrection Act and say, oh, I now have the power because I'm saying there's an emergency and I have the power to use the Insurrection Act. And any claim that that means, I mean, trust and believe people are going to run to court and challenge even the invocation of the Insurrection Act. But it does not say existing federal laws are no longer existing federal laws. That means these statutes that I just named don't get wiped off the books because the president said Insurrection Act. These statutes still apply. They are still the law of the land. And that means you still have the power in observing, in of sending information out, and even making statements in de-escalation that thank you. And there is no legal right to interfere with folks voting. That's just how it is if it's intimidating, threatening, or coercing. So ICE, here's the other important thing to know. President Donald Trump says nothing about ICE being at the polls on election day, meaning there's no order from the White House saying, go ahead, I'm sending ICE to the polls. ICE, go out to the polls. He doesn't say that. That doesn't tell you whether or not ICE will be at the polls or near the polls. I'll get to that in a minute. Because what happens is you have regional ICE decision-making about what it does and doesn't do. So even if the president doesn't send them to the polls, doesn't mean you might not be in a place where they show up. But again, the same laws I just shared applied. So what does that mean as you're observing about whether ICE is doing anything wrong? Because let me tell you about the gray areas. The gray areas are, where are they? I'm of the view, and it's a guess, but that I'll tell you, you can intimidate voters without going into the polling place. So certainly if they're going inside the polling place, you have the opportunity both in observing and engaging to say, the law does not support you being here. There's no reason for you to be here. We want to help de-escalate the situation because we're here to ensure that there's no intimidation, threatening, or coercing of voters. That is the law. Now, de-escalation means you don't have the power to stop them. Let me be very clear. You have power, and it's significant and real power, meaning your power is to use your voice, is to use your moral authority in your presence, is to observe and document. But what we don't want is you thinking your voice includes your hands or your body. It does not, because anything could become a criminal charge against you for interfering with federal law enforcement. You would have a defense. Let me be clear, but we really want you to use your words and use your documentation. If you have a video camera you're running, use a video camera, but it's observing, documenting, and engaging in de-escalation, not trying to stop them physically from whatever they're doing, because that could wind up with something where we will get you very good defense attorneys. Let me be clear. But that's not your role. Your role in observing and in using your words and in de-escalating is the role. And that should not be a small thing, given your moral authority, going back to what Dr. William Skinner said about if you choose to also be very visibly that moral leader in community. But again, not your obligation. The other thing is recognize there are people to call, because this is something where lawyers will run to court to get an injunction. So make sure you know who to call, and I'm sure that information is going to be shared with you in the resources, because that's where lawyers take the next action. But I'm thinking about the issues where ICE isn't going inside the building, where ICE is down the block, because the truth is they could be, depending on how they're behaving and what they're doing, intimidating, coercing, or threatening voters, and not at the polling sites. So just be mindful that any behavior that you see or witness that seems to be scaring voters in any kind of way, even if it's a block down the street or 2 blocks down the street, also counts as things that will be very helpful for you, not just to document, but to make sure that you're contacting people and letting folks know that it is not permissible under federal law to do that. The other thing you should know is every state has a law similar to this. They vary from state to state, so I'm not going into the state. That's too hard. There are some differences in different states about how they do it and what they say. But the reason I'm saying that is because, especially in states where you have very supportive attorneys general, they have the ability to use state law as well as federal, as lawyers running to federal court. So just please know that there are other legal resources in addition to federal law. What I'm sharing with you is federal law. But remember, it also includes National Guard troops or the Army or any other armed federal officers who are troops, as well as ICE, who are technically civil law enforcement, for which it's the intimidation, coercion, and threatening. If any ICE agent says there's a undocumented immigrant in there and we have a warrant for their arrest, it's very important for you as you're documenting to say, you don't have the power to interfere with the suggestion that they're doing their legal job. It's your ability to say you are intimidating, threatening, and coercing voters with your behavior, and we need to ask you to stop. We're asking you and beseeching you but just know it's the law and make sure you're ratcheting it up. But do not interfere with them if they say they are engaged in a law enforcement activity, even though we know we might be able to bring lawsuits against that activity. It is not your job. And this is the instance in which you're not de-escalating, and we don't want you to be in a situation where you become vulnerable. But I'm saying this to say, It matters so much to have simply the calming voice that says, we appreciate that you believe you're doing something that is your job. We're here to say that we see how it's impacting voters, and that is a violation of federal law. And we're just asking you to obey federal law. And videotape, 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 and do not physically engage in any way. And de-escalation, I know you're going to get a lot more on that, but everything you're hearing about de-escalation applies to how you engage with any federal law enforcement that shows up. Could also be FBI, by the way. But again, no federal law enforcement, whether it's ICE, whether it's the FBI, whether it's National Guardsmen, can get between voters and their polls and making them feel afraid. Please know that, and please know your moral authority, your voice, and your presence is a gift, and it is empowering, and you do have power, and use it in the way that I know your traditions train you. Thank you.